You know, Paul, I feel like an exploitative 1950s documentary could easily be made about us.
Oh, for sure.
Look at these two men. They're podcasters, whereas many men of their type would be out celebrating and dining with fine ladies. They are content to sit in and watch terrible movies in the vague hope of finding positive things to say about them.
What's this one doing? He's reaching for his mobile phone to check if anybody online has commended him for this. They haven't.
There is the oblique hope that eventually somebody will care about their endeavour. Thankfully, no one ever will.
Just to be certain, never.
See now as they continue to watch Hellboy.
Then it cuts to the nightmare demon just beheading people and shredding their bodies down his enormous god blade.
And one of the Pauls writes it down.
Public service announcements are very cool and surprising.
You never know what they're going to turn out to be. Jenny's crossing the road. She hasn't looked both ways. And soon, boom, her career turns out to be very different from what she expected. Don't be a muppet. Get on to job site.
And then it just cuts to Jennifer Connelly in Requiem for a Dream.
With the double-ended dildo.
Yeah, exactly.
This never would have happened if I had checked on job site. Here on job site, you'll never end up on the wrong end of a double-sided dildo. Do. Do you know what the problem with a double-ended dildo is? That there's just nothing but wrong sides.
You always want to be on the pushing end, don't you?
That if given satin undies, a dress, a sweater, and a skirt, or even the lounging outfit we already have on, will be the happiest individuals in the world. I'm Paul and Paula.
I'm a hard-hearted podcastman.
Well, it's one of those ones with a 5 in it, so it's down the history hole. Down the history hole!
I love that. I love that hole.
Oh, I love that hole. Speaking of that hole, today we are talking about legendarily bad directors. I didn't actually put his name. I just put legendary bad directors. Possessive apostrophe. Today we're talking about legendary bad director Ed Wood's 1953 film, Glen or Glenda.
Yeah. Oh.
The film is a semi-autobiographical docudrama about cross-dressing and transsexuality.
Is it?
Yeah.
Oh.
I missed that with all the gothic imagery. Hang on a minute.
No, semi-autobiographical.
Oh, right, yes. Yeah, absolutely. He himself was a male-to-female cross-dresser.
Ah.
Yeah.
Well, there you go. The more we know.
Portrays the main character in this.
Yes, I did know that.
Glenda. Oh, and Glen. Oh. What? Fuck, I get it.
That makes so much sense.
I get why everyone was so upset. Writer-director Ed Wood was a cross-dresser himself and hoped that the film would be a plea for tolerance. But the film was produced by a sleazy Hollywood producer. What is it when the two words are unnecessary because one implies the other?
Redundant? Tautology?
Yeah, tautology, that's it. Sleazy Hollywood producer is just...
Yeah.
As opposed to one of the unsleazy ones. Yeah, George Weiss, who wanted to make a film exploiting the public interest in the sex reassignment surgery of Christine Jorgensen. And so just said, do that as well, and I'll let you make your movie.
Okay.
So not that similar. In fact, I actually make a pretty big deal of making a distinction between the Just make a movie so I can make a really offensive poster for it.
And trailer though, right? You bet.
You bet. Oh, you know it.
You bet, sir.
You bet your bottom dollar. Now for, hey, I ain't a dame, you don't need to flirt with me. Oh, that's how I flirt.
Thus, the strange case of Glen, who was Glenda, one and the same person. Not half man, half woman, but nevertheless man and woman in the same body.
He learned that foreign doctors were doing marvelous work with a sex change. Man to woman, woman to man.
What about their children, Doctor? Would their children become the same way their father is?
Do you realize what would happen if every man in the country that wanted to wear women's clothes or felt like a woman went to their doctors and wanted a sex change?
Glen and all the hundreds of thousands of other Glens across the nation face quite a problem.
For anyone anxious about how this 1950s B-movie directed by famously terrible director Ed Wood and produced by an actual monster handled the delicate subjects of cross-dressing and transgender people, let's just give you a quick spoiler alert. It's not as bad as you might think.
Yeah.
Well,
surprising. I mean, especially if you watch the trailer first and then you watch the movie.
If you read the horrible poster first and then watch the film, you might be pleasantly surprised.
Yeah. And by it, I mean Ed Wood. He's definitely trying.
Yeah, I mean, it's a plea for understanding, but also seriously dated. Does identify both transgender people and cross-dressing people as others who deserve understanding, but also pity and ultimately treatment to correct them.
Yeah.
And it's homophobic, but in a way that's kind of ridiculous and laughable, so it makes it a bit easier to watch. The fact that homosexuals in this film are like creepy monsters who will come and steal your children.
Who will fuck you regardless of who you are, what you're wearing, and how you smell. But so don't worry, guys. Cross-dressers are completely different from that. and above that, they are still men.
Yes.
Thanks, 50s.
Thanks, 50s. But if any of that sounds too challenging, we shall see you next week. If not, then listen on as we make fun of this earnest but misguided attempt at understanding, but also of getting rid of the gays and of weird people. Oh my god, look at them. Poke them with a stick.
Weird people in general.
Yeah.
Through the lens of George Weiss. Le long.
Ah. Le visage.
Le long.
Le long.
Le long de George Weiss. Ouais. Incroyable.
C'est les problématiques. The film was hardly received at all at the time of release, but has since garnered a cult following, as have all of Wood's films. But nevertheless, it has 35% on Rotten Tomatoes and 4.2 on IMDb.
Oh.
So, Paul, you less fortunate Glen.
Whoa.
What's one thing about Glen or Glenda that made you beware, take care, beware?
Oh, good God, Paul. The inclusion of Bela Lugosi in this.
Fuck me.
He has the face in this of a man cursed to fold in on himself forever.
Startling. Because they seem new. Sudden. But most are not new to the signs of the ages.
And it's through the eyes of this demented once Dracula that we have what is presented as a very straightforward story of a cross-dressing guy who is trying to get other people to come to terms with it.
Yeah.
Beware, pull the strings. String. Yeah, it's it's everything, Paul.
It really is. Let's just get all up in it and inside of it. Let's crawl into the whole subject because after being assured that this was a movie that was made under the personal supervision of George Weiss, we get a bit of a crawl, which assures us that it's all real stuff. That it's understanding as it is now, and that you are society. Judge ye not.
Which is good. Is that a line from something?
Yeah, it's from Glen or Glenda by Ed Wood and George Weiss.
Glenda 316.
So it's a plea for understanding. Anyway, cut to fucking Dracula in a creepy science lab complete with skeletons and lightning.
Understand this. It's a crazy business we're getting into.
Look, we all want understanding, but you have to start naturally where it all begins. With Dr. Dracula, who's in a lab making smoke in a test tube, and then he tells us that he has created life. Then he fades in and out of some stock footage before declaring once again that life has begun, but also that it has ended.
People. All going somewhere. All with their own thoughts, their own ideas. All with their own personalities. Pull the string.
Now, isn't he credited as psychiatrist?
No, I don't think... Is he? Because then there's two psychiatrists. I love the idea that this is what a psychiatrist does, though.
Well, it's test tubes.
Dr. Jacobs will see you now. Now, about your mother.
Oh, ignore all this shit. He tips all the test tubes and smoke into a box.
Kicking it all into one box, then slides into the drawer. Sorry about that.
No, no. Bela Lugosi is just scientist. I apologize.
Yeah. No, that's
doing
fine,
what scientists do.
We do meet a psychiatrist because we have a policeman. There's been a suicide. There's been a suicide of Patrick's and Patricia is the individual's names. And he's killed him. He and she has killed themselves due to societal norms.
Directly because of society.
Directly.
Stabbed.
Literally murdered by
with
society.
the sword of societal norms. If this were a political cartoon.
Yielded by Piers Morgan. And the policeman goes to see a doctor. And he says some things that could vaguely be described as a conversation. He says words out loud.
As in most jobs, there's always somebody who doesn't want that job to be done. In most factories today, the employer has put up suggestion boxes. Even the employer needs advice once in a while. Maybe it shouldn't have happened as it did. But it did. Perhaps the next time we can prevent it.
The two men have sat down. They occasionally look at each other. They're both smoking.
Oh, well, that's how you know. They've both got massive cigars, therefore, this is a conversation that's happening.
There's a brandy, and neither of them are crying or punching each other. Therefore, the only thing that's left is a conversation. I just think that Harry should take responsibility for his legacy. Damn, hashtag no Meghan Markle. Just trying to remember things that Piers Morgan's gotten annoyed about. And
I love the idea of hashtag no Meghan Markle. Just no. No.
Get it.
Want it.
No. Get.
And the royal family's full. So, some incredibly dodgy audio editing later. They agree just about to discuss cross-dressing. And also factories, I think. It gets mentioned.
I don't remember that bit.
Yeah.
I could be forgiven for forgetting that bit.
It was one of the many crazy fucking bits in this film. So, the detective promises to understand as fully as a man smoking a massive cigar possibly can understand anything. And
very well. 100% comprehension.
So we've got the doctor telling us the story of Dracula telling us the story of Glen. Based on the editing.
Do you have to add this bit? Have you never heard of such a thing called showmanship? The doctor in his chair.
I understand. I've seen... The doctor asking this at the psychiatrist. So then Dracula says, look, can we try and focus in? I want to hear more about men who wear women's clothing. Oh, well, fine.
I love the idea that it would cut back to him explaining all the really abstract, interpretive dance moments of this movie.
Can we get back to the point, Doctor?
And then Lenin appears, probably, or it could be Satan. I'm not sure.
Both. What's the difference? Am I right? Brexit Day. We're finally beaten Commie Corbyn. Let's stay out of the EU.
30 minutes to go.
Oh God, it's my last 30 minutes as a European. We see Glen on the
street.
Spend
it wisely.
I will. I'm talking about a pretentious art film. So, we see Glen on the street, but also back in his house and also on the same bit of street. And he is a man who enjoys wearing women's clothing, and he's terrified of telling his fiancée because of those societal norms aforementioned.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've met Societal Norm, but he's a right prick. He's awful. Nobody likes him. In spite of his name.
I mean, we'd all want to meet him, but the problem is it's a case of he meets you.
When you when you let your guard down, you put your nose on a tube. Hey! Oh, Societal Norm. Societal. He also has that song as he goes around, sung by his chorus of singing cats. So... The narrator implies that these men may be cross-dressing simply because 50s men's clothes are just so awful. Look at this man trying to relax. He's wearing a suit of armour.
To keep the gays out. They can't let them in at home.
This man is dressed as a woman because he hasn't got his gun. That's the only difference in the outfit is the gun's not there. Alright, sweetheart. Oh. Societal norm.
Yeah, we get about a minute of a guy trying to relax in a suit that's too small for him. And the narrator over the top, the doctor...
Yeah.
Going, wouldn't it be better if we all just wore a blouse?
I mean, it actually would.
It actually would. It looks very, very, very comfortable.
It does.
That reminded me at the time of an article I read about somebody who'd taken in some asylum seekers from Syria. And the strangest thing when they were asked about living with a Westerner was, they don't have any comfortable inside clothes.
Oh. Yeah, that's
true.
I mean, I do wear the stuff I wear to the office at home, which is a suit of armour, because I do work in a medieval land.
I am a 1950s professional.
So there's some baffling talk about hair and hats.
Men's hats are so tight they cut off the blood flow to the head, thus cutting off the growth of hair. 7 out of 10 men wear a hat, so the advertisements say. 7 out of 10 men are bald.
Oh, yeah, I did wonder if that was true.
Me too.
I know it's definitely old wives' tale, because I've had friends who have gone bald and wore hats a lot, and that's their excuse.
My hat did it.
You know, hat all along. Women's hats are much nicer. They let the blood flow, therefore they have luxurious hair.
Yeah.
And this is confirmed. You don't wear hats, Paul. I'm looking at a rolling tuftual halcyon sequence.
Yep, it's gathered around the nape of my neck, and also the small of my back, and it tumbles down. And crack long hair. It's the only way to live.
Maybe he's born with it.
Maybe it's a good-fitting hat. So, then we cut to some awkwardly dancing tribal men.
Just for comparison, let's go native. Back to the animal instinct. There, in the lesser civilized part of the world, it's the who adorns himself with the fancy objects, such as paints, frills, and masks.
It must just be Dave from the off license, because that tribal dance is fucking legendary. I didn't know that tribal dancing had the equivalent of dad dances. Hey, Dad.
Someone who'd vaguely heard of the Macarena in the stories, but had never given it a go or seen it or learned it.
Maybe this was the prototype. Maybe this was the the dance that would one day evolve into and become universally acknowledged as the Macarena.
Well, anyway, that scene ends with him slinging a woman over his shoulder and carrying her off for her unflowering. And she's fine with it, and everyone's fine with it.
Well, at least the narrator did go to the effort of telling us that these were primitive lands. Madeline Kahn loves it. Can't get enough.
Yeah, oh god. Yeah, I did want to give the narrator the benefit of the doubt and say that they were using it ironically in a kind of, this is what uneducated people would call them, but I'm pretty, as the film went on, I did change that.
Probably just the way it is. He does have some wonderful lines, though, such as telling us the story about a little boy who dressed up as a girl for Halloween.
Then one day it wasn't Halloween any longer.
The next day. It was that day.
Oh, Christ.
Oh, fuck.
It's the Twilight Zone, all right?
Now, at this stage it gets tricky, because I'm sure that what happens now is that we see the wife walking in on Glen in her clothing and is shocked, and so transforms into a water cooler where she discusses it with a lady.
Sister. That was his sister.
That was his sister. She discusses it with his sister. Right, so it's weird, because later on in the confession scene, it kind of feels inexplicable, but she did once walk in on him in that clothing. Because the sister then says, maybe you should take the problem to a doctor. It's Glen who should see the doctor. I mean, well, that's definitely what I meant.
Yeah.
I didn't mean take the What?
You should see a doctor, you fucking sicko. I mean, that's very progressive of you, but I really think that Glen is the one who needs the help here. What? Get away from... Who are you? Are you Glen's sister? I think so. Yeah, that's definitely Glen's sister, because she talks about how am I going to bring home hot studs to fuck if my weird brother's there?
That's right.
Yeah,
so wait, is it the sister who bumps into him?
Later, and takes him to the doctor.
Oh no, my brain!
No. The sister walks in on Glen or Glenda.
Oh, okay.
And then they're discussing around the water cooler, and then she is never mentioned again, Paul.
Okay,
She's
good.
Just out of the film.
That's good. I like that. I feel better now. So, yeah, I feel like... And then we have a thing about how... Isn't that the sister, the bit where she's complaining about the fact that he keeps borrowing her clothes? Because I feel like those are two very different problems. My brother is dressing in women's clothes. Not a problem at all, but my brother is dressing in my clothes. I mean, only the second one's the issue there. Just get your own shit. That's not on.
Yeah. Sister or brother, touch my chamois dress once more and I will gut you. You fool.
Not because of societal norms, he's outside, but because
you're a prick.
Because you're a prick. I like this dress.
You got a big old butt in there.
Look at you squeezing your butt in there. Look at the button print on my dress. Oh no, wait, that was me. We get a message about the hundreds of thousands of other Glens out there. I like the idea it's only Glens. Everyone named Glen, but only them.
Something about that name. I call him Glen. The dad goes...
Drinks his iron brew. Yeah, so Glen does decide to tell her the truth. That his fiancé. After a very long amount of narration about all the societal norms that we should be questioning.
He dares to enter the street dressed in the clothes he so much desires to wear, but only if he really appears female. The long hair, the makeup, the clothing, the actual contours of a girl. Most transvestites do not want to change their life, their bodies. Many of them simply want to change the clothing they wear to that is worn by the opposite sex.
Yeah, he decides he's going to tell her, and she asks him, look, are you seeing another woman? And then stampeding buffalo, Dracula, a mistake has been made. The hell's open. Anyway, he goes shopping for a nightie.
Is it another woman?
Hold the string! Hold the string! A mistake is made.
And, we find out about the homosexual. Oh, here we fucking go.
Oh, God.
That was very much my feeling of, here we are.
Yeah.
But Glen and Glenda and all the Glens and Glendas have an even bigger problem. The homosexual, it is true, at times does adopt the clothing or the makeup of a woman to lure members of his own sex. But this is not so for the transvestite. The transvestite is not interested in those of their own sex. The clothing is not worn to attract the attention of their own sex, but to eliminate themselves from being a member of that sex.
I was waiting.
So you see that a transvestite in the film, is what they say,
Yeah.
is of course a perfectly normal man, and he is definitely not like a homosexual.
The homosexual are predatory in nature, and will try and stalk and seduce their prey using cigarette tricks. Whereas the transsexual depends on the very opposite. They do not want the attention of other men, and in fact, they wear these clothes to escape their own gender, not to attract it. Or something like that.
Yeah.
It's somewhat eloquently phrased.
It's eloquently phrased nonsense, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. It's like, oh yeah, I can see how you got there, I guess. Now, this is where things get interesting. The narrator talks directly to Glen, and warns him of the big green dragon that sits on his doorstep.
Beware. Beware. Beware of the big green dragon that sits on your doorstep. He eats little boys. Bobby ducktails and big fat snails. Beware. Take care. Beware.
And we can all relate to
Especially
that.
told to us by Bela Lugosi.
And then madness, sheer fucking madness.
It's what I could only see as I don't know how to end this phase of the movie.
Yeah, he can't. He has a dream where he can't rescue his fiancée as Glenda and has to become Glen to do it. Then he gets married in front of Satan/Lennon. Then Legosi starts yelling, "Pull the strings!" He watches some bizarre sex involving leather belts, and stripteases and a rape. Then Glen gets judged by society and then taken away by the devil, but becomes Glenda and is able to chase everyone off. Then the devil, then the fiancé, then crazy furniture, then hands, then laughing, then devil, then dragon, then Dracula. Then he decides to tell her the truth.
And she's alright with it.
Yeah, she's fine. I don't like it, but maybe. Hooray!
And so they then go to the doctor, and we're bookending this now. We're back in.
Well, we've got a framing story, haven't we? You know,
the policeman goes, "So, doctor, all of that story is very interesting. Tell me more." Slightly out of sequence. I will.
Yeah. Is that the end of Glen's story? No, but I'll tell you that later. First, I want to tell you about a more complex case. Later. First, I want to say a few words about hermaphrodite and pseudo-hermaphrodite. But I'll explain what that means later. First, second, with the third thing, the complex case I mentioned second. I have gone through the fucking Stargate.
I see time.
What is
your pixels?
So, he also just mentions casually, so cross-dressing can be cured. Oh, yeah. Definitely. And should be.
Oh, yeah, sure, because usually, we all know we'd want to stamp it out usually, right? Oh, yeah. I mean, obviously. Okay, cool. As long as we agree on that.
Yeah.
It's a good thing that...
it's definitely a choice.
Good thing that George Weiss came to speak to us both.
You can see him in the background of Scream. Oh, he's a lizard! Oh, explains everything.
Fuck. I'll explain that in 50 years' time.
So, You're saying that the women's clothes become a love object, and that substitutes for love that they didn't receive in their childhood. Did I say that? I am high as fuck right now, I couldn't tell you. Did you hear the 12 minutes I spent describing gyrating women and the devil? God bless you for sticking around, mate. I don't know what the fuck's going on.
Did you not see me transform this into a physical interpretive anecdote for you?
That I acted out.
Didn't see that. I got the symbols out. The symbols with a C and an S.
I keep impersonating Bela Lugosi yelling pull the strings.
Fucking amazing impression. Do you know how hard I worked on that?
And you're just sitting there with your little notepad writing it all down like this will be useful for police work.
God, no wonder you're chief of police, mate.
It's Alan. Alan and, what's Alan's,
Anne.
Anne, that's her true identity. That's Anne. Anne's story, essentially, being born as Alan, whose mother wanted a girl, and whose father didn't care either way, which, is said twice and is amazing. Don't you wish Alan were a girl, dear? I'm reading the paper, darling.
Turns out this Hoover's coming in with a new deal. It's Wilson, wasn't it? It's Woodrow Wilson, not Hoover.
Oh, fuck. All right, it's over.
Idiot.
Unplug it. Unplug it.
Mate.
Did you hear? I meant Wilson. Wilson! Wilson!
Oh shit! So
yeah,
they then War Saga. There's the Second World War to think about now because Alan Moran is in the war.
Yeah,
and we get about 5 straight minutes of footage from the war of explosions and it's just not needed. The film is already feeling like a 2-hour Terrence Malick epic at this stage.
Well, the Doctor goes over to a diagram at this stage to explain what a hermaphrodite and pseudo-hermaphrodite is without referring to the diagram he went over to.
It's different, completely unrelated diagram.
I just wanted to stand over here for a bit.
I'll stretch my legs. Now. I've been sitting down for 70 minutes.
So, Alan then comes to see Dracula, who magics him into being a woman. I'm told how the actual procedure goes down. Is you go into a room, Dracula's there, and the rest is history. Say no more about it. Anyway, he through this incredibly progressive story, this beautiful tale of becoming, as Anne is able to become, the person that she always felt she was. Our compassionate narrator describes her as like a Frankenstein's monster.
But in time, Alan is Anne, a very happy, lovely young lady that modern medicine and science has created almost as a Frankenstein monster.
Great.
Yeah.
Very, very compassionate, everyone.
Oh, I mean in a good way.
In a good way. If you've read the book, he's practically the good guy. I mean, sure, she killed a few people, but,
Who's to blame? Societal norm.
That fucking tinker. So, Anne must know how to be... I mean, there's good news and bad news here. Anne is now a woman, which is who she always felt she was, and now she finally gets to be... she gets her presentation can now finally match how she feels on the inside. But now she has to learn how to be a woman in the 50s.
Alan had all his life acted the part of the woman. Now he is that woman and must learn how it's done. Anne must learn how to do her own hair, how to make the correct styling for her facial contours. The proper walk must be adopted. A lady is a lady, whatever the case may be. Continuing my own psychiatric treatment, it was my duty now to explain to Anne the duty of a woman in her sex life.
Congratulations on the surgery. Here are some dishes.
Yeah.
And a pamphlet on how to have sex with a man. Sounds like a frightful business to me, but at least you're free of the homosexual now. He has no interest in you whatsoever.
But you do have to sleep with men. That's your lot in life as a woman. But I'm not... wish anyone knew about this at all.
I wish anyone knew about gender and sexuality and the clear distinction between them. Nope, you're a woman. Here's a cardigan. So...
This is the sci-fi element of the movie where this person has undergone an operation to become a second-class citizen.
I just want to give it a
That's
try.
dystopian.
It's like the Prince and the Pauper, but it's the man and the woman.
Definitely that. Or the Eddie Murphy film, which was a sort of imitation of that. What's the name of that, Paul? Let's stop this movie. Let's stop this talk to think about the Eddie Murphy movie.
What, there was an Eddie Murphy... Oh, wait, you mean Trading Places?
Probably that one.
I mean, I think that's it.
Oh. Sliding Doors?
Yep.
Need to say more?
Need I? Probably, but I won't.
Fucking
So, that's Anne's story. Now back to Glen, who has just been told Anne's story. Fuck me.
Yeah.
It turns out that Glen's father wanted him to be a football hero.
His father wanted Glen to be a football hero.
Oh, Jesus.
No pressure.
So he created... I mean, are you going to be the first ever football hero? Not a football star. You're going to be the first one who actually manages to save a life on that field.
The pressure of this is obviously too much for Glen.
He managed to avert World War III on the football field.
With his touchdown dance.
I mean, the ref said no showboating, but not anyone's going to argue with that.
Football judge? I'll allow it.
So after that football judge, I want to be a football fireman. So he created a persona so that he wouldn't have to put up with this shit. You know, if only I got to be a woman, I wouldn't have to be a football hero. Because women can't be football heroes. They can be football wives or football maids.
So you see, there's a very reasonable explanation for why Glen did this. And what about the Bates Motel? And that's nothing to do with this. It's got a very Alfred Hitchcock, like, psycho-style exposition bit here that's very unsatisfying. It's very... So you see, there's a very specific reason for this cross-dressing.
As you'd expect, the ever so slight counter-normal societal norms, the ever so slight counter-normal behaviour you're displaying is obviously the result of incredible trauma in your youth.
Yeah.
So...
Trauma.
We can all... Trauma. Anyway, now he has a wife. So he can treat her like a non-football hero mother and sister. So now that he's married to his mum, he's finally a completely healthy 1950s man. Snips, tails, and puppy dog tails, the end.
Yeah.
Oh, snips and snails and puppy dog tails.
So to be honest, I actually took this movie off of our list once, simply because I read the poster for the film, which reads, I changed my sex. What am I? Male or female? The strange case of a, quotation marks, man who changed his sex. That poster is so grossly transphobic that I wanted to take a shower after I read it.
Yeah.
So, I want it out. So I took it off the list, and eventually I only added it back on, since I decided that even if this is a retrograde piece of shit, we can make fun of it, you know, in an amusing way. Because it was bound to be more interesting than Vaxxed, at the very least.
Yeah.
It was unlikely to just be an hour of people describing how horrible their marriages and lives are now because one of them cross-dresses. So, and I also just wanted to see an Ed Wood movie. I saw Plan 9 when I was like a kid, and I don't remember it very well.
I've never seen an Ed Wood, and I had no idea that this was Ed Wood, so I was very excited when I realised. And then we put the film on, and it started. I don't know about for you, but for us, it started with the trailer, and it is.
We didn't get. I didn't get it.
Well, it's very good.
Me and Little Paul didn't get it.
It's
oh right.
Yeah, it's everything that George Weiss wanted the movie to be. Basically, it's how could a man do this to himself? Foreign doctors are doing marvelous work with a sex change. Why is the modern world shocked by this headline? And then it's dazzling. It's stupefying. It's true. You know, look at the freaks and that like the first three. I thought that was just going to be the movie, and I laughed throughout in shocked silent laughter. I couldn't comprehend the level of 1950s that I was getting. A brain full of.
The sheer overwhelming stiffness of it, like a blast of coffee and bacon. It just wafted through you.
Through my arteries.
I mean, that poster that put me off is definitely an invention of asshole producer George Weiss.
Yeah.
And not the strange asshole director Ed Wood, who has made a film that is much more subtly problematic than the poster, for the most part. I mean, politically, the film is kind of surprising. It makes a good argument against the fuckers who talk about nature, and actually quite eloquent argument about, we didn't have wheels, but we still drive around.
If God wanted us to fly, I really appreciate the shitty, ignorant voice that they got somebody to do for that.
Airplanes, why, it's against the Creator's will. If the Creator wanted us to fly, he'd have given us wings.
He'd have given us wings. And then they repeat that about a minute later, just in case you've forgotten that they were fuckwits.
With pictures this time, to show the fuckwittery.
We were not born with wings. We were not born with wheels. But in the modern world of today, it's an accepted fact that we must have them. So we have corrected that which nature has not given us. Strangely enough, nature has given us all these things. We just had to learn how to put nature's elements together for our use, that's all. Yet, the world is shocked by a sex change.
If the Creator had wanted us to fly...
But it is well-reasoned. It feels like an essay that Ed Wood wrote and then thought, I make movies, I better put a movie over this.
Yeah, it feels like an essay he wrote, and then it was like, okay, let's add a narrative.
Let's add a Bela Lugosi.
Oh shit, the movie's still only... Well, exactly, the movie's still only 20 minutes long, so okay. Let's add Bela Lugosi, who we can get access to. Let's add a psychedelic nightmare dream sequence. Some of this was George Weiss hoping to, make an exploitation movie, as he did. So you had bizarre sexual scenes added in, and also George Weiss wanted, he kind of okayed this movie about, accepting cross-dressers at the expense of homosexuals, great. But that was the movie that he wanted to make. And then George Weiss was like, okay, I'll let you make that movie, but everybody's talking about this sex change operation, so stick that in as well. And that's where Alan or Anne comes from.
Right, okay.
At the in the tail end of the film, interrupting the action.
Yeah.
Delaying the climax to the film. So, yeah, it's an odd case of early studio mandates and, kind of exploitative stuff being shoved into a movie that is ostensibly about tolerance.
Yeah.
And does pretty well by the standards of the time,
I think it falls into the trap that a lot of people fall into nowadays as well, which is just a very ineptly human thing. And, it just makes you very disappointed to be human sometimes of, hey, I'm very right on about this one particular cause, but as long as no blacks are a part of it, right? It's very... It's the benefit of having many voices in writing and cinema and art is that everyone gets to tell their own story. Because if it was just if it's just Ed Wood doing his story about cross-dressing, it offers a very progressive in that sense, but pretty narrow for just about everything else. Because the main message is, hey, it's completely normal for a man to wear women's clothing because he's still a man. He's still pumped full of testosterone, and he's not gay, essentially. Oh, phew.
Yeah, I mean, it makes some interesting distinctions. It uses the word transvestite throughout, which has since subsequently become a very dated and seldom used word by, that community. But it contains a very nice little critique of that word in the film that kind of preempts its eventual replacement.
Let's get our story straight. You're referring to the suicide of the transvestite?
If that's the word you men of medical science use for a man who wears woman's clothing, yes.
Yes, in cold, technical language, that's the word. As unfriendly and as vicious as it may sound. However, in actuality, it's not an unfriendly word, nor is it vicious when you know the people to whom it pertains.
And it talks about this distinction between cross-dressing and being a transsexual person, and dispels some misconceptions that are still prevalent today, especially along the whole sexuality, gender, thing. That, the assumption is, oh, you're transsexual or a cross-dresser, therefore you must be gay. You know, it's It portrays homosexual as predatory stalkers who ruin the reputation of God-fearing transsexuals, which is interesting. Yeah. It's very interesting to take one aspect of, progressive society and just plop it into the 50s.
Yeah. It's,
So you've decided to marry a man. Congratulations. You've said boo sucks to the naysayers and decided to embrace a lifestyle and a man that suits you. But now you're two men living together. Who's going to do the washing up and clean up all of the dishes and do the cooking? Have you considered hiring a woman who's too homely or ugly to have her own family? Many homely women are now renting themselves out to gays.
Yeah, it's never going to quite go in the entirely right direction that you want it to.
No.
There's always going to be something. We're very prejudiced people. But for its views on cross-dressing and transgenderism, it's refreshingly right on. From the trailer, from the poster, from the very fact that it was made in the 50s, I was not expecting there to be a single voice of reason in there.
Yeah.
And the fact that the main character is the voice of reason was touching, I thought.
There are, yeah. First, it does fall into the trap that even movies made today fall into, which is, yes, we can tell these people stories, but they have to have a sad ending, because they've chosen a dangerous lifestyle. And also, they must have experienced some sort of terrible thing in their childhood. That's the only reason why things like these things happen. Nobody has a normal childhood and decides to dress up as a woman.
Yeah.
And that's a little depressing. And there are little bits in there about sort of seeking treatment and sort of fixing the problem. At the end of the movie, it's very much a case of Glen no longer felt inclined to dress as Glenda because he had a lovely wife.
Yeah, he's getting laid.
It's still well ahead of where I thought it would be.
Yeah, and I think you've got to give it A for effort.
I think
Not
so.
George Weiss, maybe, but I think Edward himself deserves some recognition for that. If the film around it is very poorly made and not really a film, it's just a public service announcement.
Yes, so let's get on to that. We've handled the politics of the film, which are nuanced and interesting, and very representative of their time. Now let's talk about how bad/weird this is. Because, holy shit, some of this is fucking weird.
Oh!
Yeah. Whoa! So, I knew of some of George Wood. George Wood? Yep. They've amalgamated into a single entity.
Finally, at long last.
Cheap sets. The whole thing was very cheap. Very small, mostly shot in a living room.
Not very dynamic.
Not very dynamic. The use of the gratuitous use of Bela Legosi, obviously. What else? What else is a trademark of his? The stock footage. Holy shit! Just what can we use? Shots of the street. Shots of a steelworking mine. Shots of war. Yeah. Just pack it all in. We'll use that instead of shooting anything.
I did zone out for the steelworking bit, and I thought, is this an allusion to manliness, or is is there a point to this? And then I just had to, much like David Lynch, Paul, I had to sit back and say, maybe it doesn't have to make sense.
I mean, I do have to say, there's a trivia point on the ever-reliable IMDb trivia page. Who needs citation? Not me. That says that the movie was very influential on David Lynch and that he used the wind sound effect in his movie Eraserhead. Now, that much at least does seem true, because that wind sound effect does sound like Eraserhead. But I found no verifiable source to suggest that, any connection between Lynch and Glen or Glenda. But, I mean, maybe. There are bits of Eraserhead that do kind of look like this movie.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, they make equal amounts of no sense at times. I guess it's just the intent.
Compelling.
Did Edward meditate for 17 hours on end with a lizard in his mouth?
Did he eviscerate a lamb carcass in order to make up some of the costumes and such? Hard to say.
If not, then he should have done. The problem with Glen is that he liked to live inside animals.
It's this giant mutant baby of his. Oh my god. Being a crossdresser is so disturbing.
Yeah.
Such a harrowing experience. I'm societal norms.
This didn't feel its length. It felt like...
Yeah.
Titanic. It felt like I'd strapped in for a movie that was never going to end.
Yeah.
And it was 70 minutes long, Paul. It felt like I'd crossed generations whilst watching this. I felt older.
Some of it is how repetitive it is. It's very repetitive. Yes. Just the same few scenes over and over again. Sometimes the same footage over and over again. Long sequences of just sheer bafflement where you can't really hold on to anything. It's
the absurdist scenes were indeterminable. You just couldn't. It was like being inside the fourth dimension in Interstellar. There was just immeasurable.
Yeah, I would say it was fascinating. It was very interesting, and I'd love to watch more Edward when we get further down the line. But
can't wait.
Yeah, this was an interesting place to start. I kind of enjoyed it, but like you say, I was quite bored. Quite often.
Yes.
There were some long old dull sections in this.
Yeah, it's pretty boring and pretty inept. And a lot of the inept stuff wasn't laugh out loud funny.
No, this isn't Manos
either,
by any stretch of the imagination.
No.
The acting is pretty hokey throughout. Occasionally there's a funny line, but for the most part it's just kind of awkward acting.
Yeah. Lots of really disconcerting, distracting scenes of people who are supposed to be manifestations of something, and they're doing a dance or taunting Glen or Glenda.
Yeah.
You can see them looking over to one side as if Edward's shouting at them to say, no, do this instead. And they're sort of doing a half-hearted dance, and then occasionally just their eyes, Thornton Reed their way over to the side of the frame. And
Yeah.
it's loads of stuff like that. The artifice of cinema is is like Vaseline on the screen.
So it's a very interesting watch. I can see why it became a cult film. I don't think it's going to break into our top 10 because it just
Not by a long shot.
No, it wasn't entertaining enough, but it was fascinating on every level, I think. And I guess let's get into some of the things that really stood out to us. Let's quickfire. Quickfire. I'll start with just some of the Lynchian imagery, which, I guess you'd call it Woodian imagery, was very interesting.
We would now.
You would. One of them was the dress that so haunts him just stood upright and rigid in his tiny room.
Dr. Alton, he had sad eyes.
Aww.
He made him slightly charming for me. I wrote charming motherfucker, but I don't think that's apt.
He's a charming...
I liked his sad eyes.
Charming sad fucker. Speaking of sad people, sad motherfuckers, I really like the fact the movie starts with them finding the body of a crossdresser, who is it, Patrick Patricia, who has first of all written a pretty sad note that culminates in the line, "Bury me in the things that I couldn't wear in real life."
Yeah.
Which is very sad, but also this is the stakes here. He's going to now try and understand, and he talks about prevention. And the stakes of us not understanding is, there's bodies out there. There definitely are, as a result of society's intolerance of trans people and cross-dressers. So, yeah, it was nice to start with the stakes, what's actually at cost here.
Yeah. Surprised George Weiss let that through.
He tried to put a dancing naked girl in it. But,
and if you look very closely, you can actually see one.
It's gently gyrating in the corner.
In every scene.
But Edward quickly ran in and put a mustache on her so you'd think she was just another policeman.
Fools.
It'll work great.
What do you think, George? Says Edward. More titties.
More titties. I like the way you almost said that as a single word. Sorry, just more titties.
More titties.
Yes, Mr. Weiss.
And then I'm going to run away. I'm going to call myself George. And I'm going to tell a story about a war in the stars.
Jesus. I like the idea he didn't change the George bit.
Fuck.
Oh, my name's George. Oh, shit.
Are you George? No.
I forgot to say that.
Yeah, you look like, no.
Pretend I changed my name.
You really look like kill him. Of all the characters we've got, the ruthless dictator George Lucas is one of my favourite.
Along with just asshole Christopher Nolan.
Yeah.
Imagine a world where I'm not being persecuted by fascist dictator George Lucas. I think it wouldn't go something like this because I am in his sex prison.
For being too bloody good at film noise. When Police McSergeantman and the Dr. Sad Eyes are having a conversation.
Character names.
The policeman asks the doctor a question of some sort. You know what they're like. Ends with a question mark. And he said, "I heard you were a hard-hearted policeman." And the policeman, in a very grandfatherly way, goes, "Isn't that what's thought of most policemen?"
That is just quite good.
Yeah. And it was... I don't know quite how to explain it or justify it in this film, but it was just a nice moment of... I suppose you could call it a moment that a character had. A character moment.
A human moment, to come back to our favourite phrase of the first 20 episodes.
Human. Yeah. Before my film lexicon expanded to 3 words.
I learnt a third word. The guy who's afraid of automobiles is great. There's this country bumpkin looking guy leaning on his pitchfork, looking just terrified of the modern world. And his voice, it was very entertaining.
Automobiles? Bad. They scare the hosses. If the Creator had meant for us to roll around the countryside, we'd have been born with wheels.
Silly? Certainly.
I hate how change happens by default.
Automobiles?
That bit of the film has the most direction, I think, out of all of it, because I guess it's not just the Doctor talking from a script.
Yeah.
It's 2 other characters that we know nothing about until now. Just to colour that world in a little bit.
Both voiced by Bela Legosi.
If a god wanted us to fly,
he'd have given us wings like these.
God, Bela Lugosi.
Who incidentally was high off his ass all the way through the production of this film. He was
Oh, really?
deeply... Yeah, he was deeply... I mean, that's why many say that he got in with sort of Ed Wood, is because he did become quite the drug addict in his later life. And yeah, it shows in his performances there.
Yeah. Did he need the money? Or
Oh, yeah, God, yeah. Oh, yeah.
oh,
Drugs expensive,
yes.
yeah.
I mean, he's earning it.
Oh, God, yeah. I'd have paid
You can't deny that. He's really earning it. Snips and snails
and puppy dog's tails.
Well, let's talk about Bela Lugosi, because I really enjoyed the one part of the absurdist interpretive dance section of the movie that I really enjoyed was how it would occasionally cut back to Bela Lugosi reacting to them, and his reactions were not, for the most part, were not. It was very. He'd start the scene with his eyebrows, his forehead furrowed, and then over the course of the scene for the next 5 seconds, they would unfurrow by a millimeter, and you couldn't strictly see it, but you knew it was happening, and that happened about 10 times. It's just
I didn't notice it, but according to one critic I was reading a detailed critical analysis of this film. Somebody's got to, and it said that apparently Bela Lugosi reacts somewhat in disgust to the lesbian display that we see of two women sort of tying each other up. So I didn't notice that. I didn't notice that his reaction was negative to that because, well, I was, I had my mind on other things. So, I'd be curious. But
thinking of lesbians.
Yeah, thinking about the lovely lesbians. I'll have that as my next thing. Some of those sexy ladies were pretty sexy.
There's some pretty sexy ladies in there, Paul.
I know it was there for titillation, but it was, once again, it surpassed what I expected of the 1950s, largely because George Weiss didn't really pay much attention to the Hays Code, which, saw things like no kissing for more than a few minutes. So, minutes. We've done that joke before.
Look, the Hays Code never seems to have anything to say about Norks flapping around with a bit of a little bit of bra on them. You should have those big old 1950s bras and those big old 1950s Norks, and Norks are great, Paul.
Yeah, they are.
Look, I want to be the first to say on live on air. I want to come out and say that breasts are great. And I don't care who knows it. Any day, any week.
You see, Paul might be a cross-dresser, but he's definitely not gay, everyone.
Yeah. So that's why we're 93rd in film and TV in the Netherlands.
That's why they fucking love us out there. But look, Paul, a little bit of 50s bra goes a very long way. They can hold bridges up with those things.
Woven from the same silk that people salvaged from the parachutes of the war.
I thought that was going to be taken somewhere more legendary. Woven from the same silk of Thor's beard.
Famously silken Thor.
Silkeny beard Thor.
The VPN. So the way there's a line that Barbara has in the movie. The next quickfire we have in this is she says, "College is concluded," and it sounds like a name. Hi, I'm college is concluded.
Fuck, what was it? That's it. My mother was watching snooker. And so one of the narrators said, "It's going to be a brisk business," and I just thought, "Hi, I'm brisk business."
Brisk business, and you won't even know that I've been here.
Well, nice to meet you, Mr. Britt. But
never mind that. I'm college is concluded, and this dance is over.
The sister saying to her friend.
Yeah, that would be hard to explain.
That's the understatement of the year.
50s.
Just a brilliantly bad delivered line. And there weren't enough of those. There weren't enough lines that are just hilariously badly delivered. But that was one of them.
It was mostly people just staring at Ed Wood as they tried to act and had him shout at them. It might have been George Weiss, now I think about it. Hey!
Probably both.
You got titties, use them!
What do you think God gave you them titties for? If God had meant us to have titties...
He wouldn't have invented bras. You're a confusing Christian man, George Weiss.
What are you?
When the doctor says Glen is engaged to be married to Barbara, she does a little nose wrinkle. It's very cute.
Aw, can't be having that.
What?
It's 250s. Too cute. Get out of the 50s.
What are you doing in this? In this horror film?
Oh, I like Glenda reacting to her a supposed seducer. The gay guy who tries to come onto I don't know what pronoun he'd prefer when he's in his dress. But
is cross-dressing I don't know. Is cross-dressing a gender?
I don't know.
Thing?
But yeah, so anyway, Glenda reacts to the person who's trying to come on to him. Onto him. Get all over him. And Yeah, she just blows out like the match that's being held out to her, and it's just it has a really cool attitude, and that was funny.
Very 50s.
It was subdued. I liked it.
Get out of it.
Get out of there.
Or the American equivalent of get out of it.
Get out of there, sweetheart. Get out of that dress, Jim West.
George Weiss, get off the set.
He's a rough rider.
No, you don't want. No. It just gets quieter as he's wheeled out.
I want to see my hand with my hip yet.
I really enjoyed when there's the scene where Glen is saying, I've got something to tell you, but you might not like it. I don't think you like it at all. And he says, I'm afraid you'll leave me or stop loving me or whatever. And she says, crucially, she says, oh, nothing could be as bad as all that. And nothing you could say would make me leave you. I really appreciated the difference, the fact that she didn't say that second one. She didn't set herself up to fail with that. Not a, come on, Glen, I love you. Nothing you could do would make me leave you. It's like, no, I would absolutely leave you if you fucked up. Just so you know.
I'm sure you're not going to say something that would make me do that, are you? Every so often, I think the rest of them are just sentiments that get said. And one of them is, not half a man or half a woman, but both. Yeah, I like that.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, it's a good one.
I enjoy the fact that Edward just has a fag on the go for 70 minutes straight. It feels like it was part of a discussion with George Weiss. Well, I get to make an exploitation piece, see? Well, can I smoke throughout at least so I feel something? Sure, kiddo.
Perfect.
I like the fact that Glen just had this other guy who already knew. And this other guy was a cross-dresser, but they imply that he had this other guy in his life who he talks about this with.
Yeah.
And just met up with occasionally and just went, it's hard, isn't it? Yep.
For some reason, it really reminded me of the bit in the Watchmen graphic novel where Dan Dreiberg goes to visit the old night owl.
Oh,
yeah.
It's that nice and touching.
Oh God. When she says, "I have a right to know, don't I?" and Edward replies, "You have a right to know." I like that. Again, it's just surprising. It's like, yeah, you're my wife. It's not like a typical gender role thing. You have a right to make an informed decision about this, and you absolutely should know. And I'm just too scared to tell you, so I'm at fault.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a lot of very progressive, forward-thinking stuff in here. Yeah.
Look out for those gays, though.
Yeah.
Watch out.
Some, crucially. Yeah. When he's having his nightmare, his paranoia about what would happen if he told Barbara of his cross-dressing. In this nightmare, she starts laughing at him, and he gets really angry, and he sort of rips her blouse off in aggression, and she just keeps laughing, it really embodies how paranoia works very well. I think just that thought process of trying to reason with it and trying to react to your own paranoia, and it just doubling down and seeming even worse, just indescribably so. It was really actually the very haunting moment of the movie for me. There was the shot of the use of stock footage of the cars driving at night, with the "Another day done, Jack," or whatever it was. Another day done, and then "See you tomorrow, Jack," as if he couldn't remember his name.
Yeah.
It was actually quite a nice shot, a sort of end of day, end of an act.
End of act
footage.
Yeah. I wonder who shot
End of Act 8?
Well, my final thing is at the very end of the movie, just before it announces that Glen's due to be cured. When it's been a little while, there's been a bit of a buffer zone between the progressive stuff and all the other stuff.
Yeah.
So, and we get to hear...
Supposing Glen never gets over wearing girls' clothing.
Would it matter to you very much?
I love Glen. I'll do everything I can to make him happy.
And she replies something like, "No, nothing could make me stop loving, Glen." That's it. That's his name. Glen. Jimmy.
Whoever you are.
My name's Glen.
Nothing could make me stop loving what's-his-face.
Yeah, and it brought it back to that message that love is the answer. And the cure, but we'll ignore that bit for now. Love is the answer. And that ultimately, no, it wouldn't bother her very much. He says it like it's such a trivial thing, which ultimately it should be of just, well, would it be any skin off your nose? No. Fucking women.
Yeah, exactly.
He was terrible. He was a terrible man. Doesn't get into in the film, but...
Great message, terrible man. and then as the credits roll, the facade comes down, and it was about Martin Luther King, terrible man. Oh, bringing them down one by one.
one by one, you'll find out who's next. So, that ultimately...
I hope it's Candy.
So, ultimately, that was Glen or Glenda.
Yeah.
In the end, I'd recommend watching it just because it is interesting, but it's not going to be one of your laugh a minute, can't wait to watch that again style experiences.
But if you are really interested, do watch the trailer because it's like unearthing the tomb of an ancient dictator pharaoh and just wondering what traps and ghouls are going to be coming after you next.
It's exactly that, and they're all Bela Lugosi. Did we get anything from the OG team?
Well, you just give me your best OG teams, and I'll check my phone.
Cool. I was trying to do the wind noise from Eraserhead.
No, we got nothing from the OG team. Sorry for
no.
It's a minute of pure racism. No, nothing.
We'll add one per episode.
Yeah, one each, or could have one each.
One accumulated minute.
2 discrete. Oh, okay. Minute. That's great. You can fit so much racism into that.
Oh, God.
Intentional as well. Like, unintentional, that happens. Intentional is where it's at.
Yeah. That's where all the big bucks are. Just ask Jeremy Clarkson.
Did think you were going to say Corbyn.
Him too. All the Jeremys. Fuck him. All right, Paul. What's the one better thing? The one better thing.
My one better thing comes from the think mouth of Tom Hooper of The King's Speech. It's the Danish Girl featuring Eddie Redmayne and the stunning Alicia Vikander. A terrible fictitious story of a man who wants to dress up as a woman. It's a fictitious love story loosely inspired by the lives of Danish artists Lily Elbe and Gerda Wegener. Danish is crazy. And Lily and Gerda's marriage and work evolve as they navigate Lily's groundbreaking journey as a transgender pioneer. There's a lot of adjectives in that sentence. I've got to stop lifting my things from IMDb. It is a very touching, gorgeously shot and tender realization, I think, of a marriage enduring and above all else, but crucially, it is tender and well observed. And I think it's the struggles faced inwardly and outwardly that hasn't really changed in the last couple of centuries. Even if the paradigm has shifted, that makes a story like that resonate. On top of that, it's very well directed. It's Tom Hooper.
Yeah.
He's got a natural eye for directing classically and beautifully. And Eddie Redmayne and Alicia Vikander are just very, very good together as husband and wife. Eddie Redmayne, probably my favourite role of his, actually. Just he's the perfect performer for the vulnerability. And there's just something about the way Alicia Vikander holds herself as they go through the film and the strength that character shows and what she's able to bring to that. It's one of those films that I remember having a huge effect on me, but slipping through the cracks. I think at that year when it came to the Oscars, was that when Leo won? And I thought that Eddie Redmayne should have won it, but he won it the year before for The Theory of Everything, when Leo should have won it for Wolf of Wall Street.
Oh, yeah.
And it was a whole mix-up there, but I mean, for me, Eddie Redmayne's career best.
Yeah, good stuff. Yeah. And Tom Hooper does have that very natural touch when it comes to visuals in particular, and that's what he brought to Cats.
Yeah, that one didn't show up on the IMDb also directed montage. It's weird.
It's deeply buried, deep in the files. So, for my one better thing, I wanted to find a film that was about transgender people, actually starring transgender people, that really has a sort of eye on that real experience and the difficulties faced. Preferably made recently, and of those three, I chose A Fantastic Woman.
Cool.
Sebastian Lelio's 2017 film. It's about a transgender woman, Marina, whose lover dies suddenly, and her lover was... they had a somewhat quiet relationship, and she didn't get to know the family very well, and once, she tries to get involved in the kind of funeral arrangements, she finds that the family are less than accepting. It's a really gorgeous film with these wonderful little fantastical moments. Yeah, just really bring it to life. It's beautiful. Daniela Vega's performance as Marina is really fantastic, but it's a pretty strong cast throughout. And yeah, it's Lelio, who's really just quite someone to watch. You may have seen recently his excellent film Disobedience, which is about a lesbian relationship in the Jewish faith. The higher ups, if I remember correctly, because it's the wife of a rabbi. I think I'm remembering. Starring Castor fucking Troy.
Oh, cool.
As said rabbi. So
Pollux?
Alessandro Nivola. Pollock's Troy, that's the one.
Starring Nicolas Cage himself, everybody.
Starring Nicolas Cage.
As the lesbian number one.
Starring Nicolas Cage, his brother, Alessandro Nivola. That one had Rachel Weisz and Rachel McAdams and was very good. This one doesn't have Rachel McVeisz, but nevertheless, it's still a really excellent film, and Lelio is a filmmaker to watch. So
great.
A fantastic woman, and a fantastic One Better Thing. The One Better Thing. Paul, how can people find out about the fantastic One Good Thing?
Well, first they have to trawl through the shit One Good Thing, which is a completely different thing. It's whoever comes up first when you Google it instead of us.
Is it that bitch with her gardening podcast? God, I hate
that bitch. Let's at Piers Morgan about
geraniums.
Yeah.
Come on, everyone. If we all get together and bring her down.
Let's tell Piers Morgan that she's bringing back feminist horticulture or something, and he will, like a dog with a bone, he will not stop until it's exploded into a fine powder. And just like a dog. And just like a dog, we're releasing weekly episodes of One Good Thing on all your favourite podcast apps, even Spotify, the shittest one. We also have a Patreon. Yeah, my brain blanked after that. Just information
I just got
delivered.
so excited about it.
Christ, I'm still thinking about Piers Morgan. Piers Morgan hasn't signed up to our Patreon, so why don't you? Get where the getting's good. It's a safe space purely in the fact that Piers Morgan isn't there. We're releasing anti-Piers Morgan content quite at least a couple of times a month. So if none of that tickles your fancy, then just knowing that you're supporting us doing the things we love to do, podcasting while Britain regains its sovereignty from the shackles of the European Union, everybody. # Piers Morgan for life. And while Australia somehow tips on its axis independently of the planet and shifts into the sun. We'll be here talking about films that we like, films that made us cry, and new films that are or aren't similar to Dunkirk in any way.
Probably are, if you ask me.
Probably are, dicks.
Oscar bait. I'm Paul Salt.
I'm Paul Goodman.
And remember, the one good thing about Glen or Glenda is that it's not quite as offensive as you might think. And also Bela Lugosi's there, which are two mutually exclusive things.